ready to go.
All right, guys. Hi, my name is Bree. What? Oh my God! What? Okay, so hopefully that works now. Anyway, my name is Bree. My group is over here. We have Lauren, Lindsay, Valerie, and Jacqueline. And tonight we're going to be doing our presentation on interviewing. However, we are going to be focusing a lot on laws and policies that would influence your interviewing process as well as your recruitment process. So I'm going to be focusing on affirmative action, and these are policies that focus on the moral and social responsibility of making sure that groups like women and minorities are given the same opportunities that other groups of people are getting. And these are people that are usually excluded in positions of organizational and political power. So affirmative action was first used in 1961 by President Kennedy during his executive order that created the Commission of Equal Employment Opportunity, and this made sure that hiring processes were free from racial bias. However, in 1965, President Johnson signed another executive order that made federal contractors required to use these affirmative action policies when hiring minorities, and this was also extended to women in 1967. So as people thought that affirmative action policies might just be temporary. However, they're still around today, and it's important that we comply with these policies as future HR professionals. But people do see a lot of pros and cons for these policies today. So supporters of affirmative action would say that these policies are necessary in order to compensate for centuries of political, economic, and social oppression for these groups. It also recognizes the fact that a lot of these underrepresented groups are from areas of lower socioeconomic status, and that does influence the opportunities that they're given. So affirmative action policies definitely help decrease the economic disparities between these groups of people and others, and allows them to have more opportunity, even though they may not be given as many resources because they're from lower income brackets. Affirmative action also fosters diversity within the workplace, and this is really important to maintain within your employees because it does help create a nice tolerant workforce. It helps people be understanding of different cultures and backgrounds, so that's definitely an important aspect of affirmative action policies. However, people do disagree with these policies. Some people say that it can cause reverse discrimination, and that people that are maybe more qualified or more suited for a job are passed over because they aren't a part of a race or gender that are targeted with affirmative action policies. Some people also say that affirmative action policies can reinforce stereotypes and racism, because if someone is given a position based on just an affirmative action policy, someone might automatically say they're unqualified, and that's definitely not the case. Most of these people are qualified, but affirmative action is kind of helping them get these opportunities where they might not be able to before. But regardless of if you are for affirmative action or against it, you have to comply, and every company that has a federal contract for $50,000 or more is required to have an affirmative action plan in place. So how do we do that as future HR professionals? It's not so hard. You have to look at the demographics from your workforce, and then also look at the demographics of the communities from which you recruit from. And you basically just compare the two of them. If you have similar demographics, that's awesome. That's evidence that your affirmative action policy is kind of working. However, if you do see disparities between what you have and what you do need to come up with a specific plan and goal for your next round of recruiting, and making sure that you're targeting these individuals when you're looking to hire people for new positions, to make sure that these disparities are no longer present. So how can you do this? There are some tips on how you can search for these qualified minorities and women for your workforce. One easy thing you can do is just look at your employees that you already have. If there are people that are from these backgrounds in your organization, you can ask them for help, maybe even a referral, and that's just a cheap and easy way to do that. You can also look at places where these minorities are in the majority, so you can target specific colleges or organizations for job fairs. You can also look at maybe specific social medias or websites and newspapers that these people are using and recruit from there. So I don't have a personal story with affirmative action in general, but I do want to share one about diversity because I think that's a really important outcome of these affirmative action policies. So when I was a freshman, I decided to join a co-ed fraternity. That was me, my first semester. There was 6 of us, definitely very small and definitely not super diverse. The last week we just had our new pledge class enter in our organization. We have around 50 people now, and it's just an extremely diverse group of people that we have. So that's us now. You can definitely tell the difference. And diversity has been a really strong bond within our organization. We really just respect each other as individuals based on our different cultures and backgrounds. And it really just helps us respect each other, avoid conflict, and just makes us more tolerant to each other. So even though we're not necessarily a business and we don't recruit based on affirmative action policies, I definitely see why diversity is beneficial to different organizations. And we do have similar goals of organizations, so I can definitely see where the diversity of our new group has helped us with our goals. So I hope you guys learned something about affirmative action. I'm going to pass it on to Lauren now.
Hey guys, I'm Lauren, and tonight I'm going to be talking about civil rights. No. Well, basically, whatever. I'm going to talk about the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and there's also an amendment regarding in 1991. So essentially, the Civil Rights Act was signed by Lyndon B. Johnson. It was first brought up by JFK, but then we all know what happened. But anyway, the point of this is to outlaw racism, sexism, discrimination in the workplace. Title VII is very important in this because that's the foundation of this exact law. And then basically the point of that is to just guarantee that all citizens have protection under the 14th Amendment. With that, that means in the workplace, it's legal to just not discriminate against people and let them work as much as they should. And that's Lyndon B. Johnson signing it right there on July 2nd, 1964. That was, although it was enacted then, there was still room for improvement. There was a strong push for ending racism, prejudice, and discrimination, but there were still things that needed to be done. And eventually, the Jim Crow laws were banned, which is important because that way we were all just integrated together. These Jim Crow laws did not give equal opportunities to anybody, especially like people that weren't white. They were struggling to find jobs. They were struggling to be successful in life. That's why these things are important. And essentially, everybody knows this case. This is Brown versus Board of Education. Wendell Brown was the first girl to be integrated into white schools. She had bodyguards with her, and this is a landmark case that is proving the importance of why the act was formed in the first place. This regards to human resources because the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission is comprised of 5 people appointed by the president who are in charge of enforcing Title VII and protecting everybody from discrimination. However, there's a catch. Just because a law is enacted doesn't mean that there is room for improvement. Sometimes during interviews, which this will be discussed further in the presentation, you can get asked inappropriate questions. The point of this is to ensure that if we're asked these questions, we don't either end up compromising our jobs, or as an interviewer, you don't end up compromising your position when you're hiring somebody. Sometimes things get swept under the rug, which then further causes them out of trouble. once that starts happening, that's when the cases begin. That's when the cases build up. The point of this is to not let that happen. But of course, employers aren't going to listen to the rules no matter what, and it's not fair, but that's why these rules are being formed and shaped. In 1991, George H.W. Bush signed an amendment that was kind of just focusing on the legal aspects. So now that we're bringing this to court, the point of this is to kind of just provide a safe space for everyone who wants to basically bring their cases to court and sue their employers based on discrimination. The point of this was to revise the original amendment that was in 1964. And after he revised everything, we still had more work to do. This established more acts which involve compensation for the damages caused. So, for example, if someone is being harassed at work or just simply discriminated against, they're able to just bring the case to the court and take care of it. An example of this case is the Lawrence co-packing versus Antonio in 1989. It was basically a salmon casing factory, and Alaskan workers who weren't white were receiving the seasonal jobs that it wasn't fulfilling and they weren't being paid enough. However, the white workers were they receiving whatever. There's gray areas in these things such as like racial hiring, quotas, affirmative action, that it has a huge gray area, and especially sex discrimination. That happens when things just aren't clearly defined enough in the workplace and in other places. This case happened in Connecticut because the white firefighters were being unfairly tested, and the results were being thrown in the trash because other people, like black voters, they weren't the firefighters, they weren't getting the equal. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Let me just continue. The point of this is to prove that um, the point of this is to prove that with unlawful cases, there's still a chance to kind of bring it to court and just focus on what to do from here on. There's statistics though. There's about 84,000 cases that are reported to the EEOC. About a quarter to a third of these would involve race, sex, age, and disability. The rest are miscellaneous cases. Things change though, and hopefully the cases diminish, but time will tell. As I've said, there's still room for improvement, and at least the Civil Rights Act kind of changed things, but I don't know. Like, it'll be fine. And in the end, it just brings everyone together. Oh. In the end, it does bring everyone together. But, yeah. And thank you all for listening. I appreciate it a lot. So, I'm just gonna pass this off to Lindsay. Thanks, guys.
In case you missed it, my name is Lindsay Campbell. Unfortunately, no relation to the soup company. Tonight I'm here to talk to you about the Age Discrimination of Employment Act of 1967, along with Americans with Disabilities Act of 1991. Imagine a world where you have to find a job and by your 30s at your latest, and you're stuck there for the rest of your life. Sucks. And no matter what, you can't really find any better opportunities or start new if you don't like it. Or then as time goes on, you spend day after day wondering and worrying when you may be fired because you're just a bit older now than when you were when you first started off in the job. That used to be what would happen, and people would fire you because they felt you were no longer young enough to work in this job, or they felt that they would have to pay you too much more money, or find out some kind of other benefits. But that's all different now because of the Age Discrimination of Employment Act. You are no longer um, able to be discriminated because of your age, and you are protected during hiring, firing, your benefits are protected, and your employment terms. So no matter what, they can't give you less of your benefits because you may be older and need some other different kind of coverage. You still get the same amount as somebody who's younger than you. Here's a graph that roughly shows the increase over the decades of people who are ages 40 and up. And as you can see, it's increased immensely over the years because of this act. You can see at the beginning, there's hardly anyone uh, over the age of 50, and now there's so many more that are reaching into the 70s and still working. But even though it's illegal to discriminate somebody against their age in the workplace, people can find other ways to use against you so they don't have to hire you if you're older. So ways to work around that and impress your employer is by being enthusiastic and interested in work and staying up to date with technology, understanding it, and having a nice modern style to impress them. Uh, Overall, you want to make sure that they don't think you're going to leave in a year or so for retirement, because if that's the case, they're not going to retire you. They want to make sure that they're having someone who's interested and is capable of keeping up with the work, despite maybe being older than they just usually hire. So on the right, that's my grandma, and about a year or two after this picture is taken, the garden center that she worked at closed down, and we left her unemployed. So she had to find another job, and luckily was able to find one soon. It didn't take too long, where she stayed for a year, up until a couple years ago. And here's my mom, who I have seen go through a number of different jobs throughout my life, from retail, and then she completely changed her field and got a new career doing taxes. So she went from H&R Block and some other small companies, and where throughout her life I just saw her go to better benefits and do better off. And because of those two important people in my life, I was able to see firsthand that this act things change, and you don't have to be stressed out in one job for the rest of your life. You can change and go do something better and look for better opportunities that help you as a person. The Americans with Disabilities Act of 1991 was passed in 1990, and at the time they estimated it would take about 2 years to educate and give employers time to adapt to these new changes that have to take place. But luckily, for them, it only took about a year to fix everything up and have it all go into effect. And with that, it protects people from being discriminated against due to whatever disability they have, whether it's mental or physical. Um, and the ADA defines disability as the physical or mental condition that limits a person's movements, senses, or activities. And this protects them through employment, accommodations they may have, and public services. Um, with this, it isn't necessarily you don't have to bring it up during an interview, what accommodations or what disabilities you may need. But if you have accommodations that you'll need, such as a ramp if you're handicapped and to be able to move, then that's something you have to bring up. But other things that you feel may not be necessary to bring up, or you're more comfortable not, you don't have to talk about it. But it is recommended to maybe do that though, because it can help you make the others more comfortable. And millions of people now have different disabilities, whether you're missing a limb, or if it's your vision, or you just can't walk. And like there's, as you can see, there's millions of different disabilities, and we need to be able to adapt and to so they can be employed and be a part of society with us. And here in this graph, you can see from like non-disability to mild and more severe, how often they are uh, employed in the different workforces. Now I'll pass it off to Val.
Okay, so my topic is the Immigration Reform and Control Act of 1986. And I'll be talking about what this law states, why it was created in the first place, and why it is important for human resource managers to know about. I'll also be going over the employment eligibility form that is under this law and its requirements. So the Immigration Reform and Control Act of 1986 was a bill approved by Ronald Reagan on November 6, 1986. It gave illegal immigrants opportunities to gain legal status if they entered the United States prior to January 1st, 1982. This also made it illegal for employers to consciously hire illegal aliens. Once this bill was passed, it gave illegal immigrants the chance to apply and obtain legal status if they met the following requirements. The applicants had to prove that they lived and maintained a steady presence in the United States since January 1st, 1982. They have to have a clean criminal record and also provide proof of registration within the Selective Service. On top of that, the applicants also have to prove that they met minimum knowledge about the United States history, government, and English language. This is important because along with those requirements, they had to provide physical proof that they were either currently participating or better yet planning to take a course to gain better knowledge about these basic necessities. Listed under this act is a document called an I-9 form, otherwise known as the Employment Eligibility Form. The form is mandatory to administer to potential new hires at the beginning stages of the hiring process. It is required that the form be filled out by every employer for every employee hired under them after November 6, 1986. The first section of this form asks you to fill out your name, where you live, date of birth, and social security number. This asks you to fill out whether you are a citizen of the United States, a non-citizen, a lawful permanent resident, or an authorized alien that is able to work. And then finally, it asks you to check off if you use a translator to help you fill it out. The second and third sections that are behind me are filled out by the employer, which consists of them filling out information asking for identification given by the employee. So just like your 6 points of ID at the DMV, you just have to like choose from the list, and then those are your points of ID. So these documents must be verified by the employer within 3 business days of the start date. If the employee is unsuccessful showing this documentation within this time, maybe because it was stolen, lost, or destroyed, they will most likely be terminated. If they are able to bring a receipt for the replacement document, they are given 90 days to display the original document to the employer. The only reasons you would not have to fill out this form is if you were hired before November 6, 1986, when this act was passed, if you are an independent contractor, if you are not working in the United States physically, or if you were hired for casual domestic purposes such as a babysitting job or a cleaning service in a private home. As of October 2004, the I-9 form can be filled out electronically but cannot be signed. So this is just an email I got from my internship saying that before I started, I needed to fill out an I-9 form. I didn't know what this was before, and it was crucial that I brought in my points of ID on my first day, or I had to go home, and I couldn't start my first day. Failure to show the rules of this act and fill out this form as an employer can result in fines ranging between $250 and $5,000 per illegal alien, depending on the harshness of the case. If an employer accepts fraudulent documents, this can also cost the company to pay between $375 and $3,000 just for the first offense. There are various guidelines that human resource departments in every company must follow pertaining to immigration laws while they are hiring. The employer cannot discriminate based on nationality or citizenship status. This would be considered immigration status discrimination. The employer is not able to deny employment to a non-citizen who has valid work papers either. The employer can only demand forms of identity or employment eligibility documents that are listed on the back of the I-9 form that I mentioned. The employee can choose from the list A or complete both requirements of documentation by choosing from a combination from list B and C. The employer cannot prefer one document over another, and they cannot specify what documents they prefer to see. Lastly, the employer cannot be reluctant to accept identity and employment eligibility documents that seem valid when given to them. It is illegal if the potential applicant has proper identification and documents and the employer refuses to accept them. These guidelines prevent discrimination of applicants' nationality or immigration status. There's a corporate immigration policy that states that all human resource departments have to draft a written immigration policy. Since there are 11 types of visas that allow citizens from other countries to be employed in the U.S., the policy requires a number of questions to be asked. This includes, but is not limited to, who is responsible for determining the appropriate visa to use for these employees. With that being said, the organization or company must also hire an experienced immigration lawyer in case of immigration-related issues that arise. The lawyer also helps employers stay 100% ethical throughout the hiring process. It is advised that the lawyer be an expert about these types of cases. This act is important because it also helps protect jobs for American citizens and authorized aliens that are trying to find jobs in the U.S. Employers could be punished with civil penalties that could be as much as $10,000 per illegal immigrant. By putting penalties in place, it reduces the amount of employers who hire illegal immigrants. It is important that human resource managers are aware of the Immigration Reform and Control Act of 1986 because the Department of Homeland Security is also always revising the I-9 form. It is important that they are aware of the laws that allow them to hire citizens and non-citizens with proper documentation while making sure that they are not discriminating against anyone. The Immigration Reform and Control Act gave illegal immigrants opportunities to gain legal status if they entered the United States prior to January 1st, 1982. Overall, this act became an essential key when immigrants joined the workforce in the United States. It also is crucial that human resource managers have a complete understanding of what the law is, who it protects, and why it was put into place for the beginning of the hiring process. And now I'll hand it over to Jacqueline.
Hello everybody, my name is Jacqueline, and today I'm going to be ending our presentation with talking about what kinds of questions can and cannot be asked within an interview. Not only am I going to go over those questions, but I'm also going to talk about what questions should be asked overall within your interview. So first, we're going to talk about what types of questions can and should be asked. All of the questions that you're asking within your interview should be job related and they should be asked to all the applicants. This is important so you're not just picking and choosing what applicants you want to ask which questions to. You have to be extremely fair and make sure that it doesn't rise any questions with the applicants. So some of these questions that you can ask in this manner would be to ask everybody where they're from. If somebody has an accent, you can say, oh, you speak Italian, that's great. Where did you learn that? And if someone is pregnant, you can say, I have 2 children, when are you due? So to be respectful in these questions is extremely important. When it comes to the topic of drug usage, you can't just flat out say, are you on drugs to the people that are applying for the job? Instead, you should just have a drug test that's systematic with all applicants and employees. That way there is no question, it's just flat out there on paper. When the drug test comes back, it should be given to everybody who has taken it, and it's supposed to stay confidential between that person and you. If you failed it, it should also have an option to appeal it or retake it if that is available, and that is totally up to the employer. So now I'm going to talk about the 5 most common questions that are asked within interviews that are actually illegal. Some of you may have heard these in your interview and have been asked them personally. You may not have even realized that they were illegal. So the first question that I'm going to go over is asking somebody, have you ever been arrested? You can't just ask somebody if they've ever been arrested, that's illegal. You can ask them other questions that are not related exactly to being arrested. You can ask for if they've ever been convicted of a crime. You just can't flat out say arrested. Convicted of a crime is a better usage. So the next question you can't ask is asking somebody if they're married. I know it seems like a really common and simple question, but some people can take offense to that because they could be secretly asking like, oh, if he has a husband or she has a wife, they won't be spending as much time. This gives away your marital status and also can reveal your sexual orientation. Another illegal question. To to ask is asking what country somebody's from. You don't need to know anything about anybody's nationality or where they come from. That is also an illegal question that is frequently asked within interviews. That brings me to a personal story of my own. I was going for a busing job at a high-end restaurant in the town that I live in. The interview was going great until the owner said, "Oh, well, since you speak Spanish, you'll fit right in with the bus people. It'll be great." And I was immediately shocked because I never even said my nationality. I never said I speak Spanish. I'm not Spanish or anything like that. So I was just thrown off guard. I ended up quitting that job because she was treating everybody really unfair, and I should have known at that point that that statement was illegal, and it should have really been long gone way back then. So the next question that you might not have known was illegal is asking somebody if they have children. A lot of people want to ask this in interviews because they feel that, oh, if their kid's sick, they'll take more time off from work. But asking that question is illegal. Instead, you could say, is there anything going on in your personal life that could take away time from work or travel? Another illegal question would be asking somebody what their religion is or asking what religious holidays they celebrate. Again, they like to ask this to see what days you're going to take off, but instead you can ask, can you work Sundays? Because some people go to church on Sundays, and that is a more reputable question. So another illegal question would be asking somebody about their drinking, asking if they drink often, if they go out and drink. You can't ask this question. The Americans Act of Disabilities of 1990 states that you cannot ask about this. It discloses your information. So this also brings me to a personal story. I had an interview with a business management company for an internship a few years back, and I was so prepared for this question. I was so prepared for this interview. I didn't check my social media, so that leads me to the story. So I got to this interview. I was so confident. I knew I was going to get this job. I wanted this job so bad. So then he asked me, he's like, "Oh, do you drink often?" And I'm like, "No, because I really don't." And I didn't feel like I was lying. I don't go out all the time. I don't show up to work hungover. And he whips out his iPad, and it's a picture of me on Facebook that my friend tagged me in. And I was, not this picture, but I was so embarrassed. My face turned purple. I couldn't even make up an excuse. I was like, "Well, it was like her birthday party." But at that point, he didn't want to hear it. I knew I lost a job. It was so embarrassing. I am still recovering, but I ended up getting a better job after that, so things worked out. If I have any advice to you about that interview, it would be to double check on your social media always. Before going into your interview, check your social media and what you've been tagged in. Maybe even erase your account if you're not really using it anymore, because there could be things from prior in your past back there that you don't want anybody to see. I want to thank you guys for letting me inform you about what questions can and cannot be asked within the interviewing process. Now that you have a quick understanding of what is illegal, you can go into your job interview and say that you don't want to answer a certain question because it's inappropriate, and maybe even the interviewer will be impressed with what you know. I also want to thank you for letting us share with you some information about the interviewing process. I know talking about legal matter is not always fun, but I hope we made you laugh a little and gave you some of our own experience. So thank you so much, everybody.
Muy bueno.
Thanks. Speaking's my thing. It's the only thing I got.
Did you understand that? Sit down. All right. What did you guys learn that you want to share with others? Oh, AirPlay is really good. Let me turn this off. Well, I don't want to record the rest of this. So, we tell them about the AirPlay.